defensive sector. Their route cut across open farmland, broken only by scattered tree lines. This wasn't just an advance, it was a regimental-sized push to sever a key supply route. In seconds, the calm would shatter, and what followed would become a lesson in modern warfare, written in fire, steel, and the unblinking eye of combat drones. Beneath layers of reinforced concrete and steel, in a dimly lit underground command post, the air was tense and still. Screens flickered with fresh satellite imagery, and live drone feeds from forward reconnaissance units. The reports were unmistakable. Russia's armored battalion was less than 12 miles from breaching the sector's thin defensive line. The Southern Front's commanding general didn't hesitate. His voice cut through the room like a blade. "Intercept now, don't give them time to dig in." Within minutes, a multi-phase battle plan snapped into place. First, high-altitude reconnaissance UAVs would maintain constant visual on the column, marking targets and identifying weak spots in the formation. Then, waves of loitering munitions, precision kamikaze drones would spearhead the assault, slamming into lead tanks and fuel carriers to break momentum. Next came the flying mines, small quadcopters armed with shaped charges, tasked with disabling tracks and immobilizing armor caught in choke points. As chaos spread through the column, motorcycle assault teams would surge forward, weaving between stalled vehicles, targeting exposed crews and seizing control of abandoned machines. Finally, infantry units would close in from multiple vectors, cutting off escape routes and tightening the noose around any remaining Russian forces. It was a plan designed for speed, precision, and psychological impact, and every second of preparation brought the Ukrainians closer to unleashing it. The battlefield was about to shift from open farmland to a killing ground controlled entirely from the sky. At 4:05 a.m., the plan that had been finalized in the underground command post less than 20 minutes earlier roared into life. From two different approach vectors, one sweeping in from the northeast, the other from the south, a pair of Bayraktar TB2 strike drones glided silently through the pre-dawn darkness. High above the tree lines, their infrared optics painted crisp outlines of the Russian formation below, pinpointing the most critical nodes in the armored column, command vehicles and fuel trucks. The TB2 second launched their first salvo laser-guided munitions that struck with surgical precision. The first explosion tore through a fuel truck, sending a geyser of fire and smoke hundreds of feet into the air. The second ripped apart another tanker, its burning wreckage spilling across the road and blocking half the column. By the third strike, a mobile command vehicle took a direct hit, its radio mast folding in on itself like a collapsing tower. Almost simultaneously, a wave of loitering munitions, small, agile, and nearly invisible against the dim horizon, descended on the convoy from the opposite flank. They dove straight into their marks, two more fuel carriers and an auxiliary communications vehicle. In under 2 minutes, 4 fuel trucks and 1 key comms vehicle were nothing more than twisted, burning husks. The effect was immediate and devastating. Without fuel resupply, the tanks could not push far. Without reliable communications, their coordination collapsed. Russian operators scrambled to re-establish contact, but the jamming effect of burning equipment and fragmented signals left them in disarray. The battalions advanced ground to a halt. Dozens of tanks and armored personnel carriers now sat exposed in the middle of open farmland, engines idling, crews scanning nervously for threats they couldn't yet see. The once formidable column had transformed into a stationary, vulnerable target, a steel serpent frozen in place. From the Ukrainian perspective, it was exactly as planned. Phase 1 was complete, momentum broken, command disrupted, and fuel lines severed. The battlefield had shifted in their favor, and the next waves of the operation flying mines, rapid assault teams, and infantry encirclement were already moving into position. The Russians just didn't know it yet. The burning fuel trucks still sent thick black plumes hundreds of feet into the sky when Russian commanders tried to salvage the situation. Realizing their armored column was now stranded in open terrain, they ordered self-propelled artillery forward to provide covering fire and clear a path. 2 massive 2S-19 Mista-S howitzers began lumbering up from the rear, their crews hoping to suppress any Ukrainian positions before the ambush could escalate further. But the Ukrainians had anticipated this move. From concealed positions nearly 4 miles away, a swarm of FPV attack drones streaked low over the fields. Guided by live video feeds and flown with pinpoint accuracy, they dove straight into the exposed artillery pieces. The first hit detonated a full ammunition rack inside the lead howitzer, blasting its turret skyward in a shower of fire and steel. Seconds later, the second Mista S erupted into a boiling fireball, its crew never having fired a shot. With Russian artillery support neutralized, Ukraine moved to Phase 2. Fast-moving armored assault teams, lightly equipped for speed, raced in from opposite ends of the column. Their goal was clear: seal off the convoy's escape routes. Within minutes, Ukrainian BTRs and MRAPs blocked both the northern and southern exits, hemming the Russians into a narrow kill zone barely 1,000 yards long. The trapped Russian crews tried to reposition, but the disarray from the earlier drone strikes left them confused and vulnerable. Ukrainian gunners, positioned in concealed tree lines, opened up with anti-tank guided missiles and precision mortar fire. Each strike was methodical, targeting vehicles that tried to maneuver or pivot their turrets toward the flanks. The effect was suffocating. Several tanks threw tracks as they tried to reverse over uneven ground, immobilizing themselves. Others, fearing a direct hit, were abandoned by their crews, who fled on foot toward distant hedgerows. The once organized armored spearhead had devolved into scattered pockets of resistance, each isolated and unable to coordinate. By the end of the second phase, the convoy was no longer a threat. It was a collection of stranded, demoralized machines. The Russians had lost their artillery cover, their mobility, and their ability to break contact. For Ukraine, the kill zone was now fully established, and the stage was set for the night raid that would strip the Russians of both their armor and their will to fight. The steel serpent was cornered, and its head was about to be cut off. Night fell over the kill zone like a shroud, the last embers from burning Russian vehicles casting a faint orange glow across the open fields. By now, the trapped battalion was cut off, artillery support gone, escape routes sealed. That's when the Ukrainian Special Operations units moved in for the decisive strike. Approaching under total blackout conditions, the operators advanced in small fire teams, weaving through hedgerows and shallow drainage ditches to stay hidden. Each carried compact RF jamming devices, tuned to disrupt and blind the infrared camera systems mounted on Russian tanks and armored vehicles. Within seconds of activation, the targeting feeds in the Russian optics went dark, leaving their gunners effectively blind in the moonless night. Confusion spread quickly through the stranded column. Tank crews peered into the void, unable to spot movement beyond a few yards. Some began firing wildly into the darkness, wasting precious ammunition. Others made the split-second decision to abandon their machines entirely. That was when the Ukrainians struck. Using suppressed weapons and thermal scopes, they cleared vehicle by vehicle with ruthless efficiency. Those who resisted were pinned down or flushed out with stun grenades. Those who surrendered were disarmed and escorted away under guard. A number of Russian soldiers simply ran south toward the distant tree line, hoping to escape in the dark. By 2:30 a.m., the scale of the seizure was staggering. 20 main battle tanks, mostly T-72 second and T-80 second, captured intact. Many still had their main guns loaded, fuel tanks full, and communication gear operational. It was as if the crews had left mid-mission, walking away from machines worth millions of dollars apiece. Ukrainian engineers and recovery crews moved in almost immediately. Under the cover of darkness, they began towing the captured armor toward friendly lines. Some of the more operational tanks were driven out by Ukrainian soldiers who had trained on the same models earlier in the war. The night raid was over in less than 2 hours. What remained in the field were smoldering wrecks, discarded weapons, and the unmistakable absence of the Russian armored spearhead. The battlefield that had started the day as a threat to Ukraine's southern flank was now an open graveyard of steel, and Ukraine held the keys to every tank worth saving. By dawn, the night raid had left the once formidable Russian column gutted and silent. In the pale first light, Ukrainian recovery crews rolled in, their armored tow vehicles and flatbeds rumbling across the churned-up fields. One by one, the captured tanks, still glistening with dew and streaked with soot, were hooked up and hauled towards secured staging areas behind the lines. For the more intact machines, there was no time to waste. Ukrainian tank crews, many already trained on T-72 and T-80 platforms, climbed into the still warm driver's seats. Engines roared back to life, and columns of liberated armor began making the 12-mile trip to friendly territory under their own power. At forward depots, military engineers and mechanics worked in tight, efficient teams. Each tank underwent a rapid inspection checking engine performance, ammunition storage, and damage to optics or armor. The first task was always the same: strip away Russian markings and paint on fresh Ukrainian insignia. Then came the communications overhaul, replacing or reprogramming radios to mesh with Ukrainian command networks. Some of the best-conditioned tanks were earmarked for immediate redeployment. Within hours, a few were already en route to reinforce active sectors on the front, a turnaround so fast it blurred the line between spoils of war and active combat assets. But the vehicles carried more than firepower. Inside the compartments, Ukrainian intelligence teams uncovered a trove of sensitive materials encryption devices, detailed battlefield maps, and radio frequency data still loaded into onboard systems. These were rushed to secure analysis centers, where signals experts began sifting through for clues about Russian unit dispositions, command protocols, and planned movements. In terms of raw intelligence value, it was the kind of jackpot no satellite could buy. By mid-morning, the field where the Russian spearhead had stalled was empty, save for burned-out hulks and scattered debris. The real prize was already moving either on the back of a Ukrainian flatbed or rumbling under its own treads toward new missions. What had started the night before as a high-risk raid had ended in one of the war's most efficient battlefield conversions, turning the enemy's steel into Ukraine's strength and their own technology into weapons that could, and soon, would be used against them. The operation's impact was felt far beyond the smoking field where the Russian column once stood. Tactically, Ukraine had delivered a textbook demonstration of multi-phase warfare, integrating UAV reconnaissance, precision drone strikes, special forces raids, and rapid armored exploitation into a seamless sequence. What began as a scattered convoy of over 60 Russian tanks had been systematically broken down, isolated, and transformed into a resource for the very army it sought to destroy. Psychologically, the blow to Russian forces was profound. News traveled fast through the ranks. Entire tank crews had fled, their vehicles now in Ukrainian hands, some already redeployed to active fronts. For Russian soldiers, the realization that their own weapons could be turned against them within days eroded any remaining sense of security. Confidence in their ability to protect high-value assets, tanks, artillery, and command vehicles was shaken to the core. On the information front, Ukraine seized the narrative as effectively as it had seized the armor. Images of captured Russian tanks, freshly painted with Ukrainian flags, flooded social media and global news outlets. The symbolism was impossible to miss. Russia, in effect, had become one of Ukraine's largest suppliers of tanks. What might have been just another battlefield victory, instead, became a strategic public relations triumph, reinforcing Ukraine's image as resourceful, adaptive, and relentless. It was a message broadcast to the world, and an even louder warning to Moscow. In less than 48 hours, Ukraine had seized 50 Russian main battle tanks, dismantling an entire armored push and flipping the momentum of the fight in Donetsk Oblast. What began as a potential breakthrough for Russian forces ended as a complete reversal, one that left Ukraine not only with valuable hardware, but also with a renewed battlefield advantage. Strategically, the loss was crippling for Moscow. An entire assault element had been removed from the order of battle, forcing Russian planners to rethink operations across the sector. The reputational damage was just as severe. Footage of abandoned, captured, and repainted tanks undermined years of military posturing. The victory raised a sharper question, one both tactical and psychological. Is any Russian convoy truly safe from this style of warfare? And if not, how long can Moscow afford to leave this vulnerability unaddressed before it becomes a recurring nightmare? The lesson was clear. In modern war, speed, layered coordination, and real-time intelligence can neutralize even the heaviest armored formations faster than any single wonder weapon. Ukraine's fusion of UAV reconnaissance, special forces raids, and mechanized exploitation had turned raw agility into decisive